Hello wrestling fans, welcome back to the channel. It is the Pro Wrestle Machine with a member request, this time an issue of PW Torch from 1997. Let's dive in. Summary of number 422, cover dated January 4th, 1997. This issue opens with a cover story with the latest on the controversy of ECW aiming to get on pay-per-view, but the Eric Kulas Revere, Massachusetts incident among other factors causing delays. Detailed coverage of WCW Starrcade 96, including Hulk Hogan vs. Roddy Piper in the main event, with Keller's match report with star ratings, staff roundtable reviews, reader reacts, and poll results. Live event reports including the WWF in Uniondale, NY. Keller's reports on Raw and Nitro. WWF Newswire, WCW Newswire, ECW Newswire, and etc. Newswire. TV reports on ECW, USWA, and more. Keller's end notes on how WCW can seemingly do no wrong. And more. Cover story. Request TV says there is still interest in ECW. Request president says it's better for ECW's future that controversies are being addressed now, not later. By Wade Keller, Torch editor. The president of Request TV, the country's largest pay-per-view carrier, says he wants to work out the problems with ECW that caused them to back out of their partnership 2 weeks ago. 2 days before Christmas, Request's Hugh Pinero told the Torch that he had informed ECW it is pretty much final they would not carry them on pay-per-view. Now, 1 week later, he says he is willing to talk and work out the problems. Pinero says the reason everything was suddenly put on hold regarding the pay-per-view is they had not been notified of past controversial incidents and they felt it was ECW's responsibility to let them know of potential public relations problems. These people, with ECW, have to be upfront and honest, Pinero tells the Torch. We need to know how they are going to make sure everyone wrestling is 18 or older, that they'll show them a birth certificate. They need to control the use of their foreign objects. Maybe they need to show us their scripts. He says ECW is not being held to a special standard. As examples, he cites Request TV's refusal to carry an O.J. Simpson pay-per-view had one been offered, and their controversy with Semaphore Entertainment's UFC in past years. He says such controversy is not reserved for pay-per-view either, citing the controversy the WWF faced after the gun angle on Raw. USA Network read them, the WWF, the riot act when that happened. They had to promise USA not to do that sort of thing again or be kicked off the network. He elaborates on UFC. I did the same thing with the combat sports people, Pinero says. They came out with no rules. I said, we are not going to put you on the air unless we have some rules. And those people then got very professional and they basically sent us a list of rules. They have doctors now and the whole thing. It got to the point where we got comfortable showing the event. The combat sports people tried to take advantage of all of the bad publicity. But when the uproar got too great, they came up with a long list of rules. They now have rules and they have lobbyists who lobby the legislature. The same thing will happen with these people if they would just step up and respond. The ECW people need to respond to these issues. Then it can work itself out. Pinero, who hadn't been involved in the day-to-day negotiations with ECW before the controversy, has now learned more about ECW. We now understand it isn't combat sports but is more like the WWF or WCW, but more violent theater. We need assurances that the kind of theatrics they are doing is done competently. They are used to being a small, local event. If they want to become a national event, we need to do our homework on them. We have not ruled out carrying them, but we need to know they are self-regulating. ECW promoter Paul Heyman confirms with the Torch that ECW is still talking to Request TV. We are in negotiations to clear pay-per-view for March 30th or April 13th. Negotiations are ongoing. These incidents add more things to the table, but it's just another day in the office. That's it. He does not want to comment on the controversy regarding his role in informing Request about the incident, preferring to look ahead rather than dwell on past controversy. Pinero tells the Torch it's better for ECW this issue came up now and not later after the date of the event had been locked in and publicity had already gone out. For the longevity of ECW as a national entity, these issues need to be dealt with now, Pinero says. We need to know that what they do well. We need to know, up front, how they are going to do that. ECW has to step up if they want to be big time and respond to this and maybe impose a rating code. They need to discuss this up front. It's not in their or our interest to be running a national event and have a 17-year-old get maimed on national pay-per-view. How are they going to prevent that? We need to know that. It could have been an accident or a fluke. The WWF and WCW, though, run an enormous number of events. They spend time training their wrestlers to be sure they can pull off their stunts. ECW has to show they do the same. Pinero says he understands that promotions evolve and that ECW is a young upstart. When the WWF started out on Channel 9 in New York, people were blading one another. They evolved to the point where these people became cartoon characters and they didn't have to do that. I've been watching this stuff for years. They don't do much of that, blading, anymore. Actually, the big two do it at all. Obviously they don't need to. These people, ECW, think they have a differentiated niche by being a little more graphic. Pinero said he received about 40 emails last week from ECW fans upset with the cancellation of plans to carry the event. He had also been following some of the controversy on the internet. Reports on the internet blamed the Torch for ECW's problems with requests, saying the Torch made the news rather than reported it. The phone call to request at issue had been characterized by some as spilling the beans on the Revere incident when the actual intent of the call was to inquire about the pay-per-view date. It became a major topic of debate on the internet before anyone had even received last week's issue of the Torch containing the initial report. It got to the point that fans attending ECW's events over the weekend were spreading word that the Torch cost ECW their pay-per-view. The issue became so widespread that Mark Madden addressed the Torch's involvement on the January 1st WCW 900 line update, and a fan held up a sign in the crowd on the live Monday Night Raw on December 30th which read, "Keller fears ECW." I find this whole thing almost childish, Pinero says. The issue would dissipate if ECW would just address the issues rather than inciting their cult following over this. ECW should now be sitting down saying, "What are the issues here? These people are unfamiliar with us. They now are aware of some of the problems we have had at individual events. We should demonstrate how we're not going to let that happen again, how we're going to control some of the theatrics to avoid that in the future." There has been a lot of concern within ECW and discussion around the industry that someone sabotaged ECW's relationship by sending them a tape, technically a moot point, since ECW's Paul Heyman was on record saying he sent them a tape. Pinero said no one sabotaged the event. When asked if he had thoroughly checked and is 100% sure nobody with request received a tape from ECW or anybody else, he said no, none of my people. I think they received a demo tape earlier, but the tape was from the ECW and it didn't have this, the Revere incident, in it. We have never received a tape of this incident from anybody. If people think ECW sent us a tape to let us know about this problem, that's not true. No, we didn't receive a tape and we didn't get instructions from them warning us about the incident. Pinero issued a press release to internet news providers on Tuesday, December 31st, which stated, "We were surprised that ECW never mentioned that these public relations problems existed, and contrary to the claims made by ECW, no tape of the incident was sent to anyone at Request TV." Pinero tells the Torch, "Us not getting the tape may have been a bureaucratic foul-up on ECW's part, but we were not sent a copy of the incident for public relations reasons. We were unaware of it and that is why we are confused about it. We are still willing to carry the event. We just want some assurances these kinds of things will not happen again." Our event people and the CEO had never seen any footage. As far as whether he or anyone at Request had seen the tape as of 5 p.m. on Monday afternoon, December 30th, he said no. We are actually trying to get a copy of it now. Pinero says they learned details of what happened in Revere first from ECW officials, when questioned, and some other sources, eventually including accounts of the incident by fans on the internet. Our situation was we basically put a hold on everything because we were somewhat miffed the incident was not brought to our attention, Pinero says. I deal with a lot more controversial events. If Paul Heyman had actually done what he said he was going to do, then we would have been less insecure about taking the event. We would have basically dealt with this situation a lot sooner. Even if he did send them out a tape, he should have put in a phone call to the vice president of event programming at Request and Viewer's Choice and explained the whole situation, which I know he did not do. He didn't do either. Pinero says he didn't have a discussion with ECW last week, but others in his staff had been speaking with them. He says because it happened at a very busy time around Christmas and New Year's, it's been more difficult than necessary. I think this whole thing will begin to get resolved later this week or around the beginning of next week. I'm very open to talking to them. ECW wrestlers have been told informally that pay-per-view negotiations are continuing. Over the weekend there was no collective reaction to the pay-per-view being in jeopardy. At house shows, there was no blood in the Gangsters matches. There was bleeding only in the main event at each show, which may be a sign of pulling back a bit on the part of Booker Heyman. Several, if not many, wrestlers in the locker room believed there was too much bleeding on ECW shows and that bleeding lost its effectiveness when early matches contained bleeding, not to mention indiscriminate use of the house mic, brawling in the crowd, use of foreign objects, and beating of women. Because of this controversy, wrestlers who had qualms with a promotion's content may have decided to speak up more than they had in the past, pushing for these elements to be used more selectively. One weekend, though, is not enough to judge whether major changes have been made in the product. There has been speculation within the industry that Heyman was dangling the pay-per-view carrot in front of his wrestlers to keep them from jumping ship, yet didn't have expectations to actually go on pay-per-view because of the consequences should the event flop. However, sources say that some of the contracts top ECW wrestlers signed recently are void if the pay-per-view does not take place, so Heyman would risk losing talent if he were bluffing. I see a lot of good coming out of this, says one ECW wrestler. We've had our critics from day one. Some are oversensitive, but some have good points. Now those will be addressed. Cover sidebar. Piper beats Hogan clean at Starrcade. By Wade Keller, Torch editor. The domination of the NWO over WCW in recent months had been so overbearing that it seemed only a loser would cheer for WCW. It appeared Bischoff and company were going to lose their chance to actually make big money off of the NWO angle because the NWO didn't have enough credible opponents. That tide changed Sunday night at Starrcade. In an unprecedented finish, Hulk Hogan did a clean job via a Roddy Piper sleeper to lose his non-title match of the century. From a storyline perspective, that was the NWO's second major loss. The first came in the previous match when interference from NWO ref Nick Patrick wasn't enough to give Giant a win over Lex Luger. Thanks to Sting handing Luger a baseball bat, Luger was able to low blow the Giant and gain a pinfall victory. The balance of power shifted even more away from the NWO and toward WCW when the Giant broke off from the group the next night on Monday Nitro. When the Giant joined the NWO, WCW's attempt to make up for the last-second decision by Davey Boy Smith not to jump to WCW and be the much-hyped new member of the NWO, his turn was criticized as overkill. Now WCW has worked that in their favor since a Giant vs. Hogan match at the NWO pay-per-view means more than it would have had the Giant not spent a few months with the NWO. At Starrcade, Hogan became upset with the Giant for dropping the ball by losing to Luger and then failing to chokeslam Piper before Piper bit him to escape. Right after Piper bit the Giant and the Giant dropped Piper from his chokeslam attempt, Piper locked a sleeper on Hogan to end the match. WCW was also criticized for not fulfilling the promise made to fans that the winner of the 60-man Battle Royal at World War III in November would receive a WCW title shot. Well, they tied up that loose end because that was one of the Giant's primary reasons for leaving the NWO-He too, one of the title shot he earned. On Nitro the next night, as the rest of the NWO beat on Piper, Giant appeared to be ready to join in, but instead he dropped Piper and wrapped his hand around Hogan's throat. Hogan begged for mercy and agreed to give Giant a title shot because I didn't know it meant that much to you, but as soon as Giant let him go, Hogan ordered the rest of the NWO to attack him. WWF Newswire. WWF Raw tapings. December 30th in Albany, New York, at Knickerbocker Arena. Besides airing 1 hour of Raw live, the next two editions were also taped. In the opening match, Hector Garza beat Nick Barbary. Mankind pinned Owen Hart after a piledriver. During the match, Owen threw Mankind over the guardrail into the crowd. Honky Tonk Man came out to do color commentary at ringside. Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon beat Diesel and Razor Ramon when Furnas pinned Ramon after a top rope clothesline. Mini Vader, dressed just like Vader, defeated Mascarada Sagrada Jr. in a minis match. The crowd was really into the match. Sagrada was especially dazzling. After the match, Lawler made fun of both of them, saying, "I've got socks bigger than you." He then stayed and ripped on the fans and talked about facing Goldust later that night. The live Raw then went on the air. Mike Bell beat Nick Barbary. Undertaker defeated Crush via DQ. Farouk, PG-13, and Vader attacked Undertaker causing the DQ. Ahmed Johnson came out to make the save with a 2x4, but he was pummeled by the Nation of Domination and Vader. Crush accidentally hit Vader with the 2x4 when Ahmed ducked, giving Ahmed and Undertaker a chance to clear the ring. Honky Tonk Man went to the ring and threatened to sing. He said he is looking for someone who can fill his shoes and become the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time and carry the belt even longer than he did. He said thus far he has seen good talent, but not great talent. Jerry Lawler beat Tony DeVito. Lawler talked on the house mic during the match. Jake Roberts came out and stared down Lawler. Jim Ross interviewed Sid. Sid got a good babyface pop. When Sid mentioned Michaels' name, fans booed. Sid explained that at the Survivor Series he had to use the camera before the it or something else was used against him first. This rationalization that Sid had to nail an old man with a camera to prevent someone hurting him actually worked with the crowd, who cheered him. Sid said he would walk into the ring and walk out of the ring as the man. Shawn Michaels came out to his intro music to do commentary for the next match. He danced on top of the desk before sitting down. The girls in the crowd went crazy as he did a strip tease. Sid then said he was going to leave the ring because otherwise he couldn't be responsible for his actions. Vader pinned Bret Hart after Steve Austin clipped Bret from behind, leading to the Vader bomb and pin. Before the match, Bret warned Michaels not to interfere. Bret stomped on Vader and slammed him into the barrier. Vader was cheered a bit. Bret hit a Russian leg sweep and his second rope elbow, leading to his finisher, but Austin interfered at that point as the ref argued with Vader. Vader then dragged Bret back into the ring and splashed and pinned him. Bret chased Vader to the back. Undertaker beat Sid via DQ. They went toe-to-toe at the start of the match. Both got big babyface pops. After some brief wrist holds, they brawled at ringside and even into the crowd briefly. Nation of Domination interfered for the DQ. Sid and Undertaker fought them off together. Hunter Hearst, Helmsley and Lawler beat Mark Marrow with Sable and Goldust with Marlena via DQ. HTM was at ringside for commentary. He was scouting the match, looking for the wrestler he is going to manage. Marrow? Goldust got a big babyface pop. Lawler beat up both Marrow and Goldust at the start, but when the tide turned and Lawler reached to tag Hunter, Hunter turned his back on him. Later Lawler hit Hunter by accident, leading to further dissension. Hunter and Marrow fought briefly at ringside. Back in the ring, Marrow hot tagged Goldust. Hunter got his arms caught in the ropes. Goldust went berserk, attacking him for the things he had been saying lately. Marrow sensed things were going too far and stepped in and said, "Don't kill him." Goldust slapped Marrow 3 times. Hunter and Lawler stood outside and were counted out. The ref then reversed the decision and DQ'd Goldust for not letting up on Hunter a moment earlier. Rocky Maivia beat British Bulldog with Clarence Mason via countout. At the start, Bulldog teased that he was going to leave and not wrestle Rocky, but Mason convinced him to stay. Bret was at ringside on commentary. Owen Hart came out and blocked his view of the match and actually stared at Bret to be sure he didn't interfere. Bulldog had asked Owen to watch his back during the match. Owen turned to check on the match periodically. Owen complained he should have been on commentary, not Bret. Austin came out and attacked Bulldog, clipping him from behind outside the ring. Rocky made it back into the ring at the 8 count and Bulldog was counted out. Owen, who had watched Bret all of this time, didn't see Bulldog lying on the ground until he headed back to the locker room. He helped him to the back. In the dark main event, Shawn Michaels pinned Steve Austin in less than a minute or two. Before the match, Michaels got on the house mic before the match and asked them to notice that the best there is guy, or the man who rules guy, isn't in the main event. He is. Some fans cheered Austin, but Austin told them when he was done with Michaels, he then whipped the asses of those fans. Some fans chanted Michaels sucks. Michaels ate it up, and even clapped and danced to the chant. He seemed quite under control and to be enjoying the antics. After the pre-match histrionics, the bout took around a minute. Michaels won clean with a superkick. The sudden finish deflated the crowd. Because only 3 hours of Raw rather than the usual 4 hours took place, it was only 11 o'clock instead of 11:30 when taping usually ends. Few fans had left yet, so there didn't seem to be the usual excuse to go such a short time. The gate for the show was over $100,000 and was the largest for Raw. On the road. December 26th in Chicago, Illinois, at the Rosemont Horizon, $5,449, $104,408, Furnace and La Fawn beat Diesel and Ramon. The crowd went nuts when Ramon set Furnace up for the Razor's Edge. There were no NWO or Faker chants, and Ramon and Diesel, from all accounts, were over with the crowd. Crush beat Savio Vega. In the end, Farouk distracted Savio, allowing Crush to roll him up from behind for the pin. Goldust fought Ahmed Johnson to a DDQ. When Ahmed gave Goldust the Pearl River Plunge, Farouk and Crush ran in and stopped the count. The two kicked Ahmed for 2 minutes. As Goldust was about to leave, he stopped. The fans cheered him to stay, so he ran back in and saved Ahmed. The Nation of Domination turned their attention to Goldust. After a pull-apart by the referees, Ahmed and Goldust raised each other's hands, which officially signaled Goldust is now a babyface. The fans seemed to buy Goldust as a face. Sid pinned Mankind with Paul Bearer after a chokeslam. They exchanged weak plastic garbage can and chair shots. Farouk pinned Marrow. In this match, Crush distracted Marrow, allowing Farouk to get the roll-up win. Undertaker beat Hunter via DQ when Undertaker threw Hunter into the referee out of anger. Hunter nailed Undertaker with the IC belt, but Undertaker recovered and got up and tombstoned Hunter. Rather than count, the referee called for the bell and DQ'd Undertaker. Undertaker then tombstoned Hunter onto the IC belt before leaving. Hunter sold the move, lying there for a while before getting helped out of the ring. The Godwins and Bart Gunn beat Owen Hart and Bulldog and Justin Hawk Bradshaw, replacing the injured Billy Gunn, when Bart pinned Bradshaw. The fans popped whenever the slop drop was teased. The move may be so over because Sting has been knocking people out with it on Nitro most weeks. After the match, the Godwins confronted a fan. The fan said or did the wrong thing, which really set off Henry. Henry ripped off the fan's shirt and he had to be pried off of the fan. Afterward, Phineas challenged the fan to get in the ring. Because arena security did not react to the situation well after it had reached a boiling point, it could have been a setup, but for what reason other than to fit in with ECW's fan incidents? Vader and Austin beat Michaels and Bret when Austin pinned Bret with a roll-up from behind. Michaels entered the ring first to a big pop, but no bigger than Bret's or even Austin's. A sign in the front row read, "Fuck you, Hickenbottom." Vader and Austin came out and attacked Michaels and Bret right at the start. Michaels wrestled the bulk of the match. At one point Michaels finally reached for a hot tag, but Bret had been knocked off the apron by Austin. In the end, Michaels and Bret were fighting back to back. Vader shoved Michaels into Bret. Michaels then clotheslined Vader out of the ring. When Bret turned around, he saw Michaels standing there alone and thought Michaels shoved him. They exchanged words. Bret shoved Michaels. Michaels shoved Bret. Austin then rolled up Bret from behind for the easy 3 count. Michaels watched as the heels left. Bret went behind Michaels, spun him around, and started punching him for costing him the match. The two beat each other at ringside for about 3 minutes until the referee separated them. Michaels then ran into the ring and invited Bret to follow him. Bret broke free from the referees and the two started punching each other. They brawled for a few minutes. Bret floored Michaels with a headbutt. Bret then applied the sharpshooter for about 2 minutes until referees separated them. Michaels made it to his feet and as the refs held Bret back, Michaels nailed him with chin music. Michaels walked toward the locker room. Bret again broke loose and tackled Michaels. They had to be separated again. December 28th in Providence, RI at the Civic Center, $4,634, $78,454. Furnace and LaFon beat Diesel and Ramon. Farouk beat Savio. Crush beat Ahmed via countout thanks to Farouk's interference. Hunter beat Marrow with Sable. The Godwins and Bart Gunn beat Owen and Bulldog and Bradshaw when Gunn pinned Bradshaw. Undertaker beat Vader via DQ when Mankind interfered. Michaels beat Austin. Sid beat Mankind to retain the WWF title. Similar results took place on December 29th in Hartford, Connecticut. $4,957, $76,040. The crowd of 9,107 and gate of $186,299 at the Nassau Coliseum on December 27th was the largest in both categories in the arena since 1991. WWF Notebook. On America Online, Doug Furnace was interviewed. Excerpts. The best worker in Japan right now is Kobashi. Hopefully we are good enough to get by without a team name. Not to say we won't have a name, but that isn't the place we are concentrating on. We are just concentrating on wrestling right now. ECW was a positive experience. The guys in the office were working towards one goal, although the egos got into it a little. I haven't had the chance to compare the WWF and ECW yet. The level between the two is very different. The first time Phil saw me, I was in a strongman contest in Montreal. He was at the show and he was a spectator. I was competing at the show and we met. The next time we saw each other in September 1988, we did a tour together when Giant Baba put us together. He alternated me with Tom Zenk to team with Phil. The first time me and Phil worked together, we had a great chemistry. We did great against other teams from the very first match on. We had a feeling we could put something together. In the few years that I have been around, wrestlers are taking it to a new level with acrobatics. It's much different from what was expected a few years ago. It may come to the point where the levels can be raised no more. It's difficult to think that wrestlers could be good or the sport if it did. The wrestlers push themselves. The fans want more from us. I think it will go on. WCW has a kind of hierarchy there that isn't going to change. We just felt like the WWF was the best place for us right now. Vince has been very professional with us. You hear all kinds of stories about everyone, but until you meet a person, you shouldn't judge them. Everything Vince has told us has come true. He is a very professional man. The Rumble AAA match features Perro Aguayo and Canek and Hector Garza versus Heavy Metal and Fuerza Guerrera, father of Juventud Guerrera, and Jerry Estrada. The Royal Rumble dark matches feature Mascarita Sagrada Jr. and La Parquita versus Mini Vader and Mini Mankind, Espectrito 1, in a Minis match, Octagon and Tinieblas Jr. and Blue Demon Jr. versus Pentagon and Hysteria, aka Super Crazy, and a partner, and Venom and Perro Aguayo Jr. versus Mosca de la Merced and Maniaco. Mil Mascaras Cibernetico, Latin Lover, Pierroth Jr. are in the Rumble. Terry Funk hasn't been advertised in a few weeks, although he was at one time on the WWF 900 number, so his involvement is probably in question. The February 16th In Your House has moved from Memphis, Tennessee, to Chattanooga. WCW scheduled a Nitro in Memphis a few weeks earlier, which could be the reason for the move. WrestleMania tickets went on sale for $300, $100, $45, $35, and $20. The WWF would not release any of the station affiliates for Shotgun Saturday Night as of Monday, December 30th. They have kept a lid on whatever stations they are affiliated with, apparently to prevent WCW from stealing them. Strangely, whatever affiliates they do have, the WWF says it's around 15. There is no word of any station advertising it, it's showing up in TV Guide, or of anyone calling their local stations and having a station admit to carrying it. WSDR in Ohio and WJBK in Michigan are the only other two rumored affiliates. The three unconfirmed matches for the debut of Shotgun are Grimm's vs. Godwins, Goldust vs. Sincere, and Sultan vs. Rocky. The only confirmed affiliate is Wade 55 on Long Island, NY. Advanced ticket sales for San Antonio, Tex. Royal Rumble are around $14,000 for $212,000, which would not appear to put them on pace to get $40,000, much less $70,000, in the arena. The advance for the Toronto Sky Dome house show on January 31st is $14,400 for $240,000, which headlines with Bret vs. Michaels vs. Sid. December 28th to 29th TV ratings, Blastoff 0.6, Livewire -0.9, Superstars 1.5. What makes the December 16th all-time low 1.5 rating for Raw even worse? It drew fewer viewers than its lead-in, Islanders 1.7, and didn't even top the ratings of the shows following it. 3 Men and a Baby's 1.5, Silk Stockings 1.6, both of which may be firsts. Jake Roberts was awarded PWI's Inspirational Wrestler of the Year award by the PWI staff. Ahmed Johnson won Most Improved, Sid won Comeback of the Year, Sonny won Manager of the Year, Michaels won Most Popular, Michaels vs. Hart was Match of the Year, and Vince McMahon vs. Eric Bischoff was Feud of the Year. From the Where Are They Now files, former WWF wrestler gentleman Jerry Valiant, real name John Hill, 54, is now a shopping mall Santa in Indiana. The WWF runs California and Arizona house shows the first 2 weekends of 1997. The next Superstars tapings are January 21st in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. WWF Raw Report. Aired December 30th/96. Live from Albany, New York, at Knickerbocker Arena, the show opened with Vince McMahon recapping the Shawn Michaels-Bret Hart antagonism. Soundbites aired with Michaels and Bret regarding coming face-to-face with each other late on Raw, giving the impression that they'd actually be wrestling each other. The Raw opening montage aired for the first time in a few weeks. Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler opened the program. 1. Farouk, with the Nation of Domination, and Steve Austin beat Jesse James and Savio Vega at 12:30. Austin attacked James as he was singing his song during ring introductions. Savio Vega then charged from the locker room and saved his partner. Austin and Vega opened the match in the ring. They showed Bret in the back keeping an eye on Austin on a monitor. At 3 minutes James tagged in and bulldogged Austin for a 2 count. After James flew over the top rope, Austin low blowed him from behind. Bret ran to the ring in response. Austin jumped into the ring as Bret yelled at him and teased entering the ring. As they went to a commercial, McMahon said Bret wanted to take James's place and team with Savio. Will the referee allow it? McMahon asked. Indeed, after the commercial the ref had allowed Bret to replace the fallen James. Farouk and Austin beat on Savio. At 10:32 Savio made a spirited comeback which was stopped shortly thereafter by Austin. A fan ran in the background with a BWO sign. At 12 minutes Savio hot tagged Bret, who beat on Farouk, sent Austin out of the ring, and then went for the sharpshooter on Farouk. Crush ran to the ring and Austin, PG-13 and Farouk teamed up to attack Bret and Savio. Ahmed Johnson with a 2x4 made the save. Ahmed started a "You're going down" chant at Farouk. They responded loudly. Another George and Alan segment aired on the Royal Rumble. Hunter promoted his match against Goldust at the Rumble and said he'd show Marlena what a real man is like by the time the night is over. 2. Hunter Hearst Helmsley pinned Flash Funk at 11:39 in a non-title match. Before the match started, Goldust and Marlena walked down through the crowd and sat in the stands. 2 BWO signs and 1 ECW sign were in the vicinity. Flash hit some hot moves early. At 4 minutes, Hunter went to a chinlock for the better part of a minute, perhaps thinking they had already cut to a commercial. About a minute later they did cut to the scheduled commercial. As Flash made a comeback, Lawler got on the house mic and began criticizing Goldust for trying to distract Hunter. Funk went to the top rope and hit a high body block for a 2 count. He then hit a moonsault for a 2 count. As Funk turned his attention to Lawler, Hunter grabbed the IC belt and nailed Funk in the head for the pin. As Hunter left with the belt, Scorpio grabbed him and threw him back in the ring. He gave Hunter the 450 splash and then danced to his music after the match. A promo aired for Shotgun Saturday night. Jim Ross interviewed Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. As Michaels came to the ring, McMahon talked him up as a babyface and Michaels slapped fans' hands on his way to the ring. Michaels said he'd be at ringside during the Rumble but he wouldn't interfere. When Ross was going to ask Michaels the first question, Michaels mocked Bret and boated his feet and called him the Almighty and said only he should go first. Bret said that's what he finds disrespectful. Bret blamed Michaels for costing him the WWF title and said there was never an apology. Bret said he went to the bottom of the barrel when he posed for Playgirl. Girls screamed and Bret said, "I don't think girls buy that magazine." Bret said Michaels' OnlyFans are 14 years old and female. Bret said he was a disgrace to the WWF title and sooner or later they would meet, and he would kick Shawn's ass. McMahon commented that Bret wasn't exactly classy tonight. Michaels opened, "Well, I hope you got that bug out of your butt." Finally, Michaels said he's seen Bret on the road and you ain't no role model. Sid then came to the ring. Sid bragged about beating both Bret and Shawn, so he wants real competition. Undertaker's music then began to play. Vader attacked Undertaker from behind. Undertaker got the best of Vader right away and then faced off against Sid. Vader then punched Undertaker again. As Bret stepped through the ropes, Michaels lifted the ropes to straddle Bret. He then hit Sid with a tope and brawled with him before they cut to a commercial. 3. Goldust beat Jerry Lawler. Hunter and Honky Tonk Man joined McMahon on commentary. When Goldust had his attention turned toward Hunter, Lawler jumped him from behind. Goldust took over control right away. Hunter picked up Marlena to carry her to the back, but Mark Marrow walked out to stop him. Hunter threw Marlena into Marrow's arms. Goldust then charged Hunter, who stepped aside and pushed Goldust into Marrow. Goldust knocked over Marlena and Marrow. Hunter then threw Goldust into the railing. The show ended with a close-up of Marlena hurt on the ground. WCW Newswire. Future Live Event Line UPS. The lineup for the January 25th NWO sold-out pay-per-view is taking shape. It features all WCW vs. NWO matchups, which in part explains some of the recent defections from WCW. The card features Hulk Hogan vs. The Giant, Outsiders vs. Rick and Scott Steiner. It may end being Scott's first match back since sitting out with the back/hip injury. Eddie Guerrero vs. Six for the Cruiserweight title, Chris Jericho vs. Masa Chono, and Marcus Bagwell vs. Scotty Riggs. 2 or 3 other matches will be added. January 19th, the Tuesday before Sold Out Clash of the Champions special airs on TBS Live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The original main event had Hogan and Giant vs. Anderson and Luger, which obviously will be changed. Other tentative matches are Steiners vs. Amazing French Canadians, Guerrero vs. Dallas Page, Chris Benoit vs. Kevin Sullivan in a Falls Count Anywhere match, Steven Regal vs. Rey Mysterio Jr. for the TV title, Dean Malenko vs. Ultimo Dragon in a rematch for the Cruiserweight title. WCW Notebook. Not much in the way of news, with WCW taking time off during the holidays and not running any house shows. On his 900-line report, Mark Madden said after Starrcade at the hotel bar, "Chris Benoit and Woman were all over each other," he said. "Those two did everything but exchange undergarments." Apparently that is true, but they may have been putting on a show. December 21st to 22nd TV ratings, Main Event 1.2, WCW sat. 2.7, Pro preempted. December 28th to 29th TV ratings, Main Event 1.1, WCW sat. 2.4, Pro 1.7. The 2.9 and 3.3 ratings the first and second hours of Nitro drew on December 16th were the only 2 hours on TNT that day to draw above a 1.6 rating. WCW wrestlers honored at the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Awards. ostensibly as voted by the readers of the magazine. The Giant for Rookie of the Year, he is not eligible in the Torch balloting. He was included in the 1995 balloting. Steve McMichael was runner-up. Chris Benoit was runner-up for Most Improved. Ric Flair vs. Savage was runner-up for Feud of the Year. WCW's highest-placed match was War Games, finishing third for Match of the Year. Harlem Heat won Tag Team of the Year. The Giant won Wrestler of the Year, beating out Shawn Michaels. J.J. Dillon will have an on-air role as a WCW official opposing Bischoff. TBS put out an advertising supplement in trade journals celebrating 20 years on the air. There was no mention of pro wrestling in the 40-page supplement, but literally hundreds of other specific programs were mentioned throughout, which is astounding considering Ted Turner openly credits wrestling, the Atlanta Braves, and the Andy Griffith Show as the three primary reasons for his local Atlanta station becoming a national superstation. The December 23rd Nitro in Macon, Georgia, drew 4,900 for $63,214, the largest gate ever in that arena for any event. Raven, who is friends with Dallas Page, was at his Christmas party. Eric Bischoff hosted E! News Daily last week. WCW Nitro Report. Aired December 30th/96. Live from Knoxville, Tennessee, the show opened with a scene of the NWO getting out of their limo. Actually, not the entire NWO. It was Hulk Hogan, Ted DiBiase, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Eric Bischoff, Vince, Elizabeth Six, and Marcus Bagwell. Everyone bragged about holding the belt except Giant. Giant said he won World War III and therefore wants the title shot he earned. Hogan said Giant isn't the enemy and his title shot is a bye to them. As long as the belt stays in the family, we're cool, Giant said, so I can't have a chance to be the lead dog. Hogan then told Giant not to drop the ball again. The Nitro opening then aired. Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko opened the program. Schiavone smiled as he said Roddy Piper actually beat Hogan. Zbyszko said there is a crack in the foundation of the NWO compliments of Piper. Schiavone again said it's too bad Piper is not part of WCW because they would love to have a leader like him. Still shots aired of the Giant Luger Sting angle. Schiavone drew a blank when he was supposed to say Nick Patrick helped Giant escape Luger's torture rack. 1. The amazing French Canadians beat the Public Enemy at 3:28. TPE brought a table to the ring with them. Roju moved when TPE flipped over the rope and threw a table. Schiavone said TPE would have hurt themselves whether Roju moved or not. AFC then hit their finisher for the win. 2. Ultimo Dragon, with Sonny Ono, beat Jewson Liger to retain the World Cruiserweight title, 9 titles, at 4:39. They showed still-shot highlights of each wrestler's respective starcade during ring intros. Typically good action between the two leading to the Dragon finisher for the win. 3. Conan, with Jimmy Hart, beat Michael Wallstreet. Conan was scheduled to face Big Bubba. Michael Wallstreet came to the ring and said Bubba couldn't make it, but he would get him soon. When Conan raised his arms and turned his back, Wallstreet attacked him to start the impromptu match. Schiavone reiterated that it's too bad Piper was only in WCW for one match. In the end, Wallstreet punched Conan, who fell back into the fourth turnbuckle to win the match. Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff walked out to the ring. Hogan was acting as if he had won the match at Starrcade. Bischoff said it was magic when he beat Piper right in the middle of the ring. He asked Hogan, "When did you know you really had him?" Hogan said he could run for president with all the support he felt in the arena, but he wouldn't want to take the pay cut. 4. Hugh Morris beat Kensuke Sasaki, with Sonny Ono, at 4:38 via DQ. Schiavone plugged that in an unprecedented move they would be queuing up the tape for those fans who missed Starrcade so they could see how Piper beat Hogan. Bischoff interrupted the match at 3 minutes by walking up to Schiavone and Zbyszko and saying he had the tape in his hand so no tape would be shown on Nitro. He seemed a bit at a loss for words during the segment. When Bischoff left, Zbyszko wondered if anyone had a beta of the match. Schiavone then plugged the replay. Pretty clever. The match ended when Ono nailed Morris with his Japan flag pole after Morris had moonsaulted and covered Sasaki for the pin. Schiavone proudly said they have still shots of Piper's win over Hogan. Schiavone said Piper sent a great message to kids everywhere that if you persevere, no one can stop you. Sort of duplicitous, right? 5. Harlem Heat, with Sherry, beat the Faces of Fear, with Colonel Parker, at 3:36. Schiavone plugged the NWO pay-per-view and said they are plugging it because they have to, but also because they want to because there are some great WCW athletes on the card. The way WCW is presenting this pretty much exposes to anyone still thinking they were some kind of separate entity that the two are actually linked. At 2:40 Parker whipped Sherry from behind. Sherry charged Parker and tackled him to the ground. Raju came to ringside and threw powder in the eyes of Stevie Ray. Barbarian nailed Meng with the kick of fear, but Booker T nailed Meng from behind. When the ref turned around, he counted Meng's shoulders down. Gene Okerlund interviewed Dallas Page. Page was really down as a result of losing his chance at the U.S. title. He said he would fix things, but wouldn't say what that meant. The second hour opened with Mike Tenay and Bobby Heenan taking Zbyszko's place on commentary. Bobby Heenan said, "He's a pathological liar. He can't help himself. He just lies constantly, and when a liar is running a group you'll have nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble." That was in reference to Hulk Hogan and the NWO, by the way. 6. Glacier beat Disco Inferno at 4:16. Disco said on the house mic before the match he has been practicing his leg hold for 2 weeks and has perfected it, so Glacier ought to just leave the ring now. When Glacier threw Disco to the mat, Disco said, "That's it now, I'm mad." Funny stuff. Disco grabbed the ref to block Glacier's kick. A moment later Glacier caught Disco turning around after showboating with an awesome-looking sidekick. Good matchmaking to put these two against each other. 7. Chris Benoit, with woman, pinned Chris Jericho at 3:57. After a great 4 minutes of action, Benoit hit a top rope belly-to-back suplex for a totally clean pinfall. Okerlund interviewed Ric Flair and Steve and Deborah McMichael. Benoit and woman joined them. Deborah told woman she missed her. Steve and Benoit faced off. Flair stepped between. Jeff Jarrett then walked to the scene and stepped in. Jarrett confronted Flair about his best friend Arnold Anderson not being there. Flair said Arn on New Year's Eve is at the Hyatt with a drink. He then danced with woman. Benoit said Jarrett proved last night he can be anything but a horseman. Deborah said, "She's just got all this built-up hostility because of her weight gain over the holiday season." She added, "It's a good thing I got between you and Chris because you were going to kill that little boy." Deborah's interviews have been fantastic lately, both in terms of content and delivery. 8. Octagon Cheeto and Mascara de Sagrada beat Jurito Estrada and Pirotita Morgan at 2:18. Tenay explained the minis are based on full-sized wrestlers in Mexico. Heenan observed, "It's like a riot in a daycare center. A great disappointment. With only 2 minutes they tried to fit too many spots in too quickly and the match was a cluster mess with a lot of missed moves and very few credible ones. This was untypically bad for these guys." 9. Rey Mysterio Jr. fought Dean Malenko to a 10-minute draw at 9:20. Very good match both in mat work and high spots. 10. Lex Luger defeated Greg Valentine with the torture rack at 2:40. The finish came out of nowhere as Luger slipped out of a Valentine suplex attempt and locked on the torture rack. If you haven't done so yet, watch referee Mark Curtis during a match he referees rather than the wrestlers. He's as animated a referee as you'll ever see, even shadow boxing every time a wrestler throws a punch. Roddy Piper walked out with a big smile on his face. Piper said the history books will now read "I'm the icon." Piper said beating Hogan is his last fight because he's getting too old for all of this. He said it was important for him to have that fight for his pride. The NWO music started and Hogan and Bischoff came out. Piper told Hogan, "I am the icon. You've got to smell it, eat it, and poop it." Hogan said Piper is a lucky person. When the fans booed, he told them to shut up. They chanted Roddy. Hogan said, "You better shut up. This is about your family, boy. The only reason after I beat your brains out that I didn't end it for good is your son begged me to take it easy on Pops." Piper said, "Let's do it one more time," and he threw off his outfit. Hall, Nash, and Six then attacked Piper from behind. The Giant walked to the ring slowly. Fans threw garbage into the ring. Scott Norton and Ted DiBiase joined in. Nick Patrick came to the ring unabashedly wearing an NWO t-shirt. Hall and Nash dropped him over Norton's knee. Giant stood and watched as Giant bashed Piper on the hip with a chair. They told Giant to chokeslam Piper. Giant grabbed Piper by the throat but a few seconds later dropped him. Paramedics came to the ring to stretcher Piper away. Hogan said last night was strike 1, tonight is strike 2, and he slapped Giant. Giant grabbed Hogan by the throat and intensely yelled at the rest of the NWO to get out of the ring. Hogan yelled, "I'm sorry." Giant yelled, "I want the gold." Hogan cried some more and Giant let go. "I'm sorry. I love you, man," Hogan said. Giant asked, "Can I have my title shot?" Hogan said, "Yeah, I didn't know it meant that much to you." As soon as Hogan escaped the ring he ordered the NWO to attack him. Giant disposed of them one at a time in this order: Bagwell, Vince, Bogus, Sting, and then they all jumped him at once. Hogan hit Giant with the WCW belt. The show closed with scenes of an ambulance driving Piper away from the arena. The angle was very well executed. Overall, one of the better nitros. WK. ECW Newswire. Request for the record, the following is a transcript of the complete press release issued by Hugh Pinero, president of Request TV, regarding the pay-per-view controversy. The statement was primarily drafted, according to Pinero, to inform those getting their information from the internet about all of the misinformation circulating. Request TV has been in ongoing discussions with Extreme Championship Wrestling to carry one of its events in 1997. During these discussions we learned about specific incidents involving an underage ECW wrestler who appeared to be seriously injured during an event in Massachusetts. We were surprised that the ECW never mentioned these public relationship problems existed, and contrary to the claims made by the ECW, no tape of the incident was sent to anyone at Request TV. Whenever we work with a new pay-per-view event producer, we like to be thorough in investigating their ability to stage a quality event. Therefore, my staff was instructed to research these alleged incidents and discover that they were true, and also learned that generally ECW was theatrically more violent than other wrestling events. Based on this new information, and the fact that an ECW event would be a step up from being a local event to a national pay-per-view event, we decided it would be prudent to temporarily cancel the event while we did additional research to better understand how ECW operates. We are still considering carrying the event and, as we would with any national pay-per-view event, we are taking great precautions to ensure that when an event does air, it meets all of our standards to create longevity for that particular event. What others are saying, the ECW pay-per-view controversy has been a subject of discussion in many places. Mark Madden, on the January 1 WCW 900 line report, said the following: New Jack of the Gangsters bladed a 17-year-old substitute wrestler from ear to ear, causing more blood to flow in a wrestling ring than I have ever seen before. It was very gory and very serious. ECW originally said the 17-year-old jerked his head, causing the severe cut himself, but I've seen the tape and that's simply not true. New Jack in fact showed the crowd the blade and seemed to enjoy juicing the kid. It certainly was not done within the usual pro wrestling context. ECW let the match continue while the kid bled profusely, lying there in a pool of his blood for quite some time. I love ECW's product and I think it should be on pay-per-view, and I think it should be, as they say, the viewer's choice. But I think the ECW administration has forgotten there are two words in wrestling business. What has made Eric Bischoff so successful is he has one foot firmly planted in the corporate world even as he runs a wrestling company. You have to live in the real world. ECW does not. It tries to justify terrible, serious incidents by imposing the twisted, anything-goes mentality of the old-school wrestling business. Well, pay-per-view ain't old school, and in 1997, pro wrestling is big bucks. If you'd rather have a twisted brotherhood running a renegade promotion and creating your own definition of right and wrong, then no pay-per-view for you. Bingo Hall forever. I hope that's not the case, because ECW's product deserves better, and the creative mind of Paul Heyman does, too. Joey Styles said on the January 1 ECW 900 line report, everything that has happened in the last week, there was a story going around, it was in the dirt sheets, it was on the internet. You may have heard about it, you may have read about it, that certain wrestling journalists, who I don't need to mention anymore, called Viewers' Choice Television, called Request Television, specifically Hugh Pinero the president, and got our pay-per-view canceled, broke off our negotiations. That's not exactly true. That's not going to end our pay-per-view hopes. Not to mention that other people are saying, could this be the beginning of the end of ECW? Do we look that weak after 3.5 years? Pay-per-view negotiations are continuing with Request Television. Viewers' Choice had not agreed to carry an ECW pay-per-view before this story broke. Yes, we are too extreme for Viewers' Choice Television. And if you want to call them, get their phone number, feel free. If you want to email them, feel free. However, there are still pay-per-view negotiations going on between Request TV and ECW. Let me tell you, no date has been announced yet, but I would bet there is going to be an ECW pay-per-view in early 1997. Culiz's reaction: Steve Culiz, Eric Mass Transit Culiz's father, told The Torch 2 weekends ago that his son went to the neurosurgeon a few days earlier and was told he has nerve damage in his forehead because the blade cut through muscle tissue. He said Eric will end up with an incredible scar on his face. He said, although my son didn't belong in that match, it took a lot of guts for him to get in the ring. My son was being bamboozled and he was too naive to understand what was going on around him. Everybody seems worried about what's going to happen to ECW, but what about my son? Eric Culiz said he has no interest in a career in wrestling because of this incident. Anybody who wants to get into wrestling, don't bother. Even for charity or in your backyard, you could die. I have different feelings on life and God now that this has happened. I sit up at night and try to think of reasons not to cry. With the cut I look like someone who just got out of prison. I hate New Jack for what he did to me, I hate Paul E. for lying about everything, and most of all I hate wrestling. He said during the incident he wanted to run away. I could feel the blood running through my hands. I had to roll with it though. I didn't want to run away. I wanted to get out of there, but I knew I'd fall down. ECW wrestlers continued to say without varying their story that Kulis seemed to underestimate what happened to him at the time of the incident because, according to what Tommy Dreamer said afterward to other wrestlers, on his way to the ambulance Kulis was asking if he earned a job for going through what he did and didn't seem to be in bad spirits or at all worried. Paul Heyman says it was what he believed to be the relatively good spirits of Kulis that caused him to make what sound, in retrospect, like cold comments about the incident when talking to reporters right after the event. He says he had no idea how bad Eric was cut or the shape he was in, only that he had been asking if he would be invited back. He says it was on that basis he made comments to reporters after the event that Kulis had gone through an ECW initiation, and when he returned, the ECW fans would think he was one tough sob for making it through the match against the Gangstas. On the road, December 28th in Allentown, Pennsylvania. At Ag Hall, Big Stevie Cool Richards beat Axel Rotten, Mikey Whipwreck beat Bad Crew No. 2, Spike and Bubba Ray Dudley beat Balls Mahoney and Jimmy Cicero, Brian Lee beat Louis Spicolli, Rob Van Dam beat Chris Condito, Taz and Sabu had a brief confrontation, Pitbull No. 2 beat Devon Dudley, Sabu vs. Perry Saturn turned into an impromptu three-way dance when Cronus interfered and Van Dam and the Gangstas joined in, ending when Saturn pinned Mustafa and the Eliminators pinned Van Dam after total elimination. Tommy Dreamer and Beulah beat Shane Douglas and Francine, Raven beat Sandman in a dog collar match. Future lineups, January 3rd in Webster, Massachusetts. At Webster Town Hall, Douglas vs. Dreamer for the ECW TV title, Raven vs. Spicolli for the ECW HVT title, Pitbull 2 vs. Devon Dudley, Eliminators vs. Dudleys for the tag titles, plus Sandman Taz, Lee, BWO, Condito. January 4th in Revere, Massachusetts. At Greyhound Park, Dreamer and Pitbull 2 vs. Douglas and Lee, where the wrestler who scores the pinfall gets a title shot that same night against the ECW champ, plus Sandman vs. Devon, Condito vs. Mikey, BWO, Eliminators, and more. Jan 10 in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. At the Flagstaff, Raven and Stevie Richards vs. Sandman and Dreamer, Douglas vs. Spicolli for the TV title, Eliminators vs. Condito and Lee for the tag titles. January 11th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At ECW Arena, Douglas vs. Dreamer, Terry Funk vs. Lee, Spicolli vs. Condito. January 17th in Northeast Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At the Tabor Youth Association building, corner of Whitaker and Lauda, Raven and Douglas vs. Dreamer and Pitbull 2, American Journal Challenge, Sandman vs. Ball Mahoney, Eliminators vs. Dudleys, Gangstas vs. Axel and Devon, Condito vs. Mikey. January 18th in Scranton, Pennsylvania. At the Psych Youth Center, a new ECW spot show location, Raven vs. Sandman Dreamer and Beulah vs. Douglas and Francine, Pitbull 2 vs. Lee, Eliminators vs. Gangstas, Condito vs. Mikey, Dudleys vs. Axel and Devon, plus BWO. Notebook, the phone number of the ECW offices to get info on future shows, tickets, directions, or merchandise is 215-928-9772, or for recorded directions and future shows, call 610-544-042. On the likely headline matches for what appears to be a likely April 13th pay-per-view are Taz vs. Sabu and Raven vs. Terry Funk. ECW TV report. Extreme Championship, December 27th. The show opened with Little Guido introducing the newest member of the FBI, Davey Morton Paisano. The FBI has a match with Spike and Bubba Ray Dudley. The segment was designed to get over Bubba's new finisher, a variation of the Diamond Cutter called the Bubba Cutter. A King of the Hill, Royal Rumble style, Battle Royal aired. Taz came out and said he wouldn't wrestle because he wasn't seated first. Sabu and Taz faced off, but didn't touch because the Eliminators attacked Sabu first. Taz then left. Order of elimination was Mustafa and New Jack, by the Eliminators, Spike Dudley, by Eliminators Guido, by Bubba, Balls Mahoney, by Bubba, Cronus, by Chris We Want Sonny Condito, Bubba, by Brian Lee's primetime slam through a table. Shane Douglas eliminated himself rather than face Tommy Dreamer. Condito, by Louis Spicolli, Tommy Dreamer, by Brian Lee, Louis Spicolli, by Brian Lee, the BWO, by Brian Lee, Sandman by Lee, Brian Lee, by the winner, Sabu, This was over 23 minutes of commercial-free action. Well booked with several feuds advanced. Condito was the Battle Royal's best worker. Joey Styles reviewed a video montage of the January 96 House Party ECW event. Styles reviewed the Douglas Pitbull feud. Hype Central with Joel Gertner featured an interview with Shane Douglas and Francine hyping Douglas's title match. Douglas showed the chair he said started it all. Hey, didn't Dreamer have the chain on last week's show? Douglas claimed Dreamer's role model wasn't Terry Funk, but the franchise. Francine stuck her tongue at the camera at the end. Cute. Joey Styles announced ECW is negotiating with Terry Funk to face Brian Lee January 11th at the ECW Arena. The BWO segment aired. Big Stevie Cool and the Blue Guy were in Times Square for Christmas. Stevie superkicked Santa Claus. Joey Styles announced that the Eliminators beat the Gangstas for the ECW Tag Team titles to close the show. Bruce Mitchell. Etc. Newswire. Independent highlights. Week of December 1st to 7th. Carolina Championship Wrestling, December 7th in Concord, NC at Hartselle Gym. David Osborne beat Nick of Time, Gravedigger beat Dr. Dread, Tim Jackson and Will Shooter and Sweet Dreamers beat Killer Force 1 and Leon El Gigante and Grunge Master. Tony Hunter beat Mr. Franklin. Dreamer Warrior beat Beastmaster Rick Link. Ringlords beat L.A. Stevens and Gary Royal. David Isley and Mad Max and Colt Steele beat Ron Studd and the One-Man Posse and Star Rider. Continental Championship Wrestling, December 6th in Dallas, Texas. At the Sportatorium, Firebreaker Chip beat Kit Carson. One-Man Gang beat Mark Valiant. Treach Phillips Jr. beat Hot Shot Cassidy. Shawn Summers beat Maniac Mike Davis to retain the TV title when Firebreaker Chip and Steve Cox interfered. Action and Al Jackson fought Dapper Danny Davis and Kit Carson to a no contest when the Three Kongs and Iceman Parsons interfered. Ed Brock beat Treach Phillips Jr. Rod Price beat Chico Cabello. Mark Valiant beat Steve Cox. Mercenaries Scott Braddock and Mike Blackheart beat Derek Stone and Tony Coletti. Said Man beat Mr. Wrestling 3. Firebreaker Chip beat Ed Brock via DQ. The Sicilian Studs, Guido Falcone and Vito Mussolini, beat Big Country and Black Bart when Bill Irwin interfered. Devin Michaels and Charlie Norris beat One Man Gang and Manu. Justin Hawk Bradshaw appeared during the card for an interview segment challenging Price to a title match. Mid-American Wrestling, December 6th in West Allis, Wisconsin at the Knights of Columbus, 225. Barfly Mike pinned Pete Madden. Bouncer Bolinski and Farmer Vic beat the Love Brothers via DQ. Spymaster pinned Mauler. Billy Joe Eaton beat Dominating Danny Dominion via DQ to retain the MAW HVT title. Danny Boy Hawkins beat Colonel Blatnick to win the MAW Cruiserweight title. Fabulous Moolah and Gigolo Johnny Mercedes beat Frankie DeFalco and Manly Matt Millions. Upcoming dates are January 4th and January 25th. Call 414-777-3941 for info. National Wrestling Alliance promoter Dennis Corraluzzo, December 7th in Mount Holly, New Jersey. At the Armory 500, Ace Darling pinned Mr. Puerto Rico, Ralph Soto, The Icon, NWA HVT champ, pinned Psychotron in a non-title match. Herno Kid pinned Billy Real. The Lost Boys beat Madonna Wayne Gacy and Twiggy Ramirez when Wolf pinned Twiggy to capture the NWA tag titles. Great Martin pinned Frank Third Degree Burns. Reckless Youth pinned Dave Keller to retain the NWA and Honor title. Don Montoya beat Rick Ratchet in a dog collar match. Mideastern Wrestling Alliance, December 1st in Baltimore, Maryland. At Teamsters Hall, Quinn Nash beat Earl the Pearl. Jason Knight pinned Joe Thunder. Playboy Bobby Starr pinned Johnny Taylor. Knuckles Zanich beat Cat Burglar. Wise Guy Jimmy Cicero beat Boo Bradley. Darkside, Rebel and Glenn Osborne pinned the Samoan Gangster Tribe. Matty Smalls and Coco Samoa. Corporal Punishment beat Johnny Desire. Chris Condito pinned Mark Schrader. Adam Flash beat Steve Corino to win the Lieutenant HVT title. Raven and Steve Richards and Blue Meanie beat Axel Rotten and Freaks of Nature. Formerly Headbangers, Mosh and Thrash, Power Slam Wrestling, December 6th in Cartersville, Georgia. At Gabby's, 120, John Arden beat Mr. Fine. Willie Love beat Keith Arden. Jack Victory beat T-Rez. Kenny Arden beat Pretty Boy. Sunset Sam beat Bo La Du. Miscellaneous TV Report. USWA Live on WMC TV, December 28th. Dave Brown hosted the show on his own because Corey Macklin was on vacation. They opened with highlights of the Nation of Domination vs. Dream Team Brawl from last week's show. Nation of Domination came out with Wolfley bragging about being champion and JC Ice beating up Bill Dundee. The Nation of Domination had another induction, Spellbinder, whose name has been changed to Elijah. Spellbinder came out dressed in black leather with a black leather coat. Also, he's a mute. I wonder where they picked up that whole idea. 1. Elijah pinned TD Steele. Elijah began the match with a salute. Nation of Domination gathered around the desk, lying over it, blocking Dave Brown's view. He has to stand to the side to call the match. Wonder where they got that idea? Sir Mo talked about Mabel aligning himself with others, and therefore needing to come back to earth. In the match itself, Steele put an armbar on Elijah. Elijah hit him with a fist and took over. Steele mounted a desperation flying press. Elijah caught him and executed a reverse flip. Elijah hit Steele with another first for good measure and then covered him for the pin. 2. Sir Mo beat Tony Myers. Dave Brown called for a guest commentator. Mabel came out to the table and the Nation of Domination scattered quickly. Mo is losing his mind, pledging allegiance to Farouk, Mabel said. He gets the victory but loses all of his morals. Mo whipped Myers into the ropes, clotheslining him and dropping a knee to the head. Mo hit Myers with a leg drop and a spin kick. Mo pinned Myers, then broke the cover. Mo then sideslammed Myers and hit him with an elbow drop from the top rope for the 3 count. Brown interviewed Sir Mo and Mabel. Mo said, "You've been my partner a long time. We are still partners. I drove this tag team for 3 years. All you had to do was eat pizza, drink Coke, and go along for the ride. I've been carrying this team for 3 years. You took a vacation for 4 months. In that time I've been in the trenches taking names. You can be an idiot if you want to." Mabel responded, "I won the King of the Ring and I crowned you Sir Mo. I was the one who got us in the WWF. When we were in the WWF we were much better than Farouk." Mo said, "No more pretty guy. I made you what you are today. The world is mine." Mabel slapped Mo. Mo kicked Mabel. Nation of Domination ganged up on Mabel, then the Dream Team came out. A pull-apart brawl ensued. Brown interviewed Brian Christopher, who said Wolfley refused to put the belt on the line today. He hyped Wednesday's ladder match. 3. Brian Christopher beat Akeem Muhammad. Olajuwon insulted the crowd before the match. Muhammad saluted a handful of Nation of Domination fans in the crowd. Wolfie went to the broadcast desk with a ladder to do commentary. Wolfie and Muhammad stalled, then finally locked up. Christopher hit Muhammad with a series of fists and Muhammad rolled out of the ring. Muhammad wanted a test of strength and forced Christopher to his knees, but Christopher recovered and flipped Muhammad. He then hit a body press. Moesha tripped Christopher. Muhammad went for a clothesline then body slammed Christopher, but missed a splash. Christopher used his fist again and delivered a perfect superkick. Olajuwon jumped on the apron. Moesha distracted the ref. Wolfie snuck in and tried to hit Christopher with the ladder, but missed and hit Muhammad. Christopher set up the ladder, climbed to the top, and used a fist drop and a cover for the win. The Nation of Domination ran in and the Dream Team made the save. Mo and Mabel then fought each other. Mabel put a side drop on Mo and the Nation of Domination fled. Brown interviewed Jerry Lawler, who said Miss Texas is bigger than ever, noting her chest. Lawler promised to light up Elijah like a Roman candle. 4. Mike Samples and Vic the Bruiser beat Blaze and Donald Kelly. Blaze is a rookie from the USWA wrestling school. Samples and Vic double-teamed Kelly leading to the pin. Moesha came out and said she was mad because she thought she was Miss USWA. Mabel said she is not only a sorry excuse for an African-American woman, but she can't wrestle either. "We are bringing in Miss USWA and she's going to pull all that stinking weave out of your hair." Bill Dundee talked about JC Ice. "I got you into the wrestling business and I'm going to get you out." Bill Dundee beat Wolfie D via DQ. JC Ice was on commentary. Dundee chased Moesha and Wolfie hit him from behind. Bill went berserk on Wolfie with kicks and punches. Moesha tripped Dundee and Wolfie got the advantage. Wolfie clotheslined and stomped Dundee and got a 2 count. Dundee hit a cross body press but couldn't get any momentum. Moesha slugged Dundee and Dundee chased her. Wolfie went to the apron and kicked Dundee. Wolfie missed a leg drop off the top rope and Dundee slapped the sleeper on. JC Ice fetched the Nation of Domination to do a run-in and the Dream Team made the save. They gave away fireworks over the phone. 6. JC Ice and Muhammad beat Flash Flanagan and Stephen Dunn. After a 4-way brawl, Samples went to the ring to taunt Flanagan. Olajuwon snuck behind Flanagan and rolled him from behind for the win. JC ranted about his childhood and not having his father Bill Dundee around for the holidays. A decent show. They hyped the January 1st lineup with Lawler vs. Elijah, Mabel vs. Mo, Christopher vs. Wolfie. Ladder match, Dundee vs. Dundee. A fan's dream match. A fan is selected and picks any match he wants to see. Flanagan and Dunn vs. Samples and Bruiser, and Moesha vs. Miss USWA. William Brooks, New Japan World Pro, December 21st. Taped December 7th in Okayama. 1. The Triple Warriors beat Shinya Hashimoto and Junji Hirata and Tadao Yasuda at 9:19. Not a good match. It's amazing how light Hashimoto went on Hawk. Powers pinned Yasuda after a Northern Lights bomb. 2. Koji Kanemoto and Shinjiro Otani beat Jewson, Liger and Norio Oniga at 15:48. Another excellent match from the juniors. Kanemoto continues to impress coming off the injury, though now Otani is sporting a big brace on his left knee. The usual hot moves back and forth, with Liger looking strong due to the finish, Kanemoto pinning Liger with a Liger bomb. Nice touch, likely setting up a J-Crown match between the two in early 1997. 3. Kazuo Yamazaki and Takashi Iizuka beat Keiji Muto and Osamu Nishimura at 10:34. A good match with solid work and acceptable heat. But something was missing since it was obvious Nishimura was going to lose. Iizuka got the honors by pinning Nishimura with a blizzard suplex. 4. Manabu Nakanishi and Satoshi Kojima beat Masahiro Chono and Hiroyoshi Tenzan at 7:50 of a non-title match. This had good heat and turned into a good Chono and Tenzan style match. Once again, Kojima was the star, overshadowing his two peers Tenzan and Nakanishi. Nakanishi used an Argentine backbreaker torture rack to force Tenzan to submit. John Williams, All Japan Pro Wrestling 30, December 22nd. Taped December 6th in Tokyo at Nippon Budokan Hall. 1. Kimala 2 and Sabu beat Yoshinari Ogawa and Monakia Mossman at 12:57. The match was good in flashes, mostly during spots by either Sabu or Mossman. The heat was spotty as well, even for some of Sabu's nicer spots. Overall, Sabu looked fine and his execution was better than normal. He pinned Mossman with a top rope Frankensteiner. 2. Jumbo Tsuruta and Stan Hansen and Takao Mori beat Jun Izumida and Tomohiro Honda and Masao Inoue at 11:10. An incredibly boring match. If that's not enough, it's sad to see Tsuruta and Hansen in their old stomping ground, Budokan Hall, looking like shells of their former selves. Jumbo's harder to watch as health problems have physically drained him. Jumbo got the win by pinning Inoue with the Thez press. John Williams, ECW Live Event Report. Arena Event Spotlight. ECW, December 27th in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, at the Farmers Market. 1. Chris Condito pinned Mikey Whipwreck. The crowd chanted, "We want Sonny." Mikey nailed a Frankensteiner and took Condito over the top rope for a huge pop. They brawled briefly outside the ring. In the ring, both men traded near falls with rolling reversals. Mikey nailed a top rope Frankensteiner, but Chris put his foot in the ropes to break the count. Mikey nailed a flying body press, but Condito reversed it and hooked Mikey's tights for a pin. Great fast-paced opener. 2. Louis Spicolli beat Balls Mahoney. Spicolli got a pop when he used a chair against Mahoney at ringside. Mahoney nailed a spinning wheel kick over the top rope which awed the crowd. Mahoney grabbed Spicolli in the crotch and then licked his hands. The crowd booed. Spicolli nailed a fireman's buster for the pin. 3. Spike and Bubba Ray Dudley beat Bad Crew. Bubba Ray launched Spike over the top rope onto both Bad Crew, which got a huge pop. Back in the ring, Bad Crew worked over Spike until he hot-tagged Bubba Ray. Bubba hit the Bubba Cutter, Flying Diamond Cutter, for the win. Taz said they wouldn't let him wrestle because of what he did to Rob Van Dam last time he was there. He called out Sabu. Sabu ran in, and Taz kicked him twice before Sabu was pulled out. Taz said Sabu is a pussy like the Sheik. Taz challenged anyone to get into the ring and ripped on everyone before he left. 4. The Gangstas beat Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten. All four brawled on the outside. New Jack threw Devon into a wall and broke it. Devon bladed. New Jack and Devon brawled through the crowd. New Jack came off the top rope and hit Axel with a chair. A short, but intense brawl. 5. Big Stevie Cool, with the Blue Guy, Hollywood, and 7 at 9/10 beat Gorgeous Gordy after a superkick. Short match. Basically a comedy squash. 6. The Eliminators beat Sabu and Rob Van Dam. Van Dam and Saturn exchanged holds early in the match. Van Dam missed a body press. Cronus tagged in and worked over Van Dam. Cronus hit a leg drop for a 2 count. Van Dam powerbombed Cronus and tagged in Sabu. Saturn then tagged in, also. Saturn hit Sabu with a flying kick. Cronus executed a released suplex. Van Dam bounced off the ropes, but missed Cronus. Later Saturn hit a fisherman suplex for a 2 count. As Sabu launched off a chair and then off the top rope, he hit Saturn, which got a pop. The crowd was heavily into Sabu. Saturn nailed a top rope elbow for a 2 count. Sabu flew through the middle rope onto Cronus. Sabu then set up a table, but Saturn caught him and threw him through the table. Van Dam missed a spread eagle splash and the Eliminators went for the total elimination. About a minute later they attempted the total elimination again, and hit it for the win. A great tag match. Everyone worked hard and the crowd was into it from start to finish. 7. Pitbull 2 beat Brian Lee in a grudge match. Lee attacked Pitbull 2 as he entered the ring. He tried to hang him with his chain. Pitbull broke free and they fought into the crowd and then out into the parking lot. Back in the arena, Lee slammed Pitbull through a table. Lee then hit Pitbull with a chair in the back. Lee came off the second rope and Pitbull threw a chair at him. Lee went for a second rope chokeslam, but Pitbull reversed it into a fallaway slam for the pin. Both wrestlers brawled after the match. Lee chokeslammed Pee Wee Moore after the match to get his heat back. 8. Raven, with Tyler and Laurie, beat Sandman to retain the ECW HVT title. Sandman drank 2 beers and then busted his head open before the match began. Raven attacked Sandman, whacking him 3 times with his cane. At ringside, Raven set up Sandman by calling him, and when Sandman charged, Raven backdropped him through a table. Raven hit Sandman with 3 hard chair shots to the head. Down the aisle, Sandman hit Raven with a chair and a piece of the security railing. In the ring, Sandman nailed a DDT. Tyler came in to distract Sandman from a pin attempt. Raven hit Sandman with a cane and the DDT. The Blue World Order came out. Raven just stood there and got hit in the eye by Sandman, so he mistakenly hit Hollywood Nova and Meanie, and just stopped short of hitting Richards. Raven then pushed Richards. Richards pushed Raven, and he fell back into Sandman in a tease of a title change, although Raven kicked out at 2. The crowd popped thinking the title was going to switch. Sandman got up, but Richards surprised him with a super kick, so Raven scored the pin. A good match with tons of heat and a good tease at the end. 9. Shane Douglas and Francine beat Tommy Dreamer and Beulah. Dreamer and Douglas went right at it. Dreamer hit Douglas low with a house mic. Dreamer was up on the apron with a chair when Douglas dropkicked the chair into him. Douglas and Dreamer brawled down the aisle. In the ring, Douglas tagged Francine. She leg dropped Dreamer. He got up and went after Francine. Douglas held Dreamer as Francine went to slap him, but he ducked, so Francine hit Douglas. Douglas then tagged back in and worked over Dreamer for about 5 minutes. He then tagged in Beulah, who rubbed down Douglas's chest and got on her knees in a position to perform a sexual act. But instead, she nailed him with a crotch shot. Dreamer tagged back in and continued on offense with a swinging neckbreaker for a 2 count and a DDT that got a near 3 count, but Francine put Douglas's foot on the ropes to stop the pin. Dreamer then grabbed Francine and tagged Beulah. The women rolled in the ring. Douglas nailed Dreamer low and then turned his attention to give Francine a belly-to-belly. Dreamer broke that up and DDT'd Douglas for the pin. Overall, a good ECW card. Chris Forbes reporting. WWF Live Event Report. When? December 27, 1996. Where? Uniondale, Long Island, New York. What? WWF House Show. Attendance 9,107, $186.299. 1. Doug Furness and Phil LaFon beat Diesel and Razor Ramon when LaFon pinned Diesel after a spin kick. A little sloppy in spots. 2. Farouk beat Savio Vega. Farouk ripped on Ahmed Johnson over the house mic. When a fan cursed to Farouk, Farouk responded, "Shut the hell up, we've got kids out here." Savio made a comeback and hit some spinwheel kicks until Farouk came away with a spinebuster for the win. 3. Ahmed Johnson beat Crush by a countout. Ahmed got a big pop during his ring intro. Crush went on early offense, but Ahmed came back with a sidewalk slam. They brawled to the floor where Crush threw Ahmed over the railing into the crowd. Crowd throw number 1. Ahmed recovered and dove over the railing, attacking Crush. Back in the ring, Crush made a comeback. Ahmed teased that his kidney may be re-injured. As the match progressed, Farouk finally ran into double-team Ahmed until Ahmed made a comeback and double-teamed them both. Ahmed made it back into the ring before the 10 count to win by countout. 4. Goldust beat Jake the Snake Roberts. Didn't they just turn Goldust babyface? I guess they assumed Long Island fans were all watching Monday Nitro last Monday, and perhaps for good reason, maybe they were. Goldust fought as a heel. Then it got more confusing because he got on the house mic and told everyone to be quiet or else he would go out there and kick everyone's asses. He then gave Jake Roberts the finger. They didn't lock up for about 8 to 10 minutes. The action once it started was pretty slow. 5. Shawn Michaels pinned Stone Cold Steve Austin. Michaels had the only advantage as Austin gave fans the finger. Austin soon made a comeback and hit a body slam. Austin then hooked on a chinlock, but Michaels recovered and hit an enziguri. When he went to the top rope, Austin caught him with a punch. They fought to ringside where Austin attempted to piledrive Michaels on the floor, but Michaels backdropped out of it. Back in the ring, a few 2 counts later, they exchanged punches and then sleeper holds. Michaels then did the clothesline, kip-up routine followed by the top rope elbow. Michaels went for chin music, but Austin blocked it. They brawled on the floor and Austin picked him up and dropped Michaels over the railing. While this was going on, the ref called for the double countout. Back in the ring, Austin got on the house mic and called Michaels a piece of crap and said, "Let the match continue." As Michaels lay there dead, Austin complained that he wanted the match to continue. Austin wound up going outside and getting Michaels and dragging him back into the ring. A minute later, Michaels made a comeback and hit chin music for the 3 count. As Michaels celebrated, Austin snuck up from behind and hit a stunner to end his celebration. Michaels slowly rose to his feet after Austin left. Fans began booing. When Michaels got fully to his feet, the boos got even louder and louder. As Michaels walked around the ring, his music began to play, but Michaels immediately signaled for the music guy to cut the music. He then stepped to the floor and circled the ring, yelling at the booers and high-fiving the cheerers. As he walked toward the locker room, the boos got louder, so he returned to the ring and looked around as the boos continued. Finally, Michaels grabbed the house mic and something to the effect, "5 years of hard work and this is what I get. The next time you see me, I'm going to be a lot different, so I hope you guys like it and you can choke on it." He then walked to the back, but right before he got there he put his arm up in the air a la Big Daddy Cool Diesel. A very interesting sight. The experience was just like at MSG in the Survivor Series with all of the booing. 6. The Godwins and Bart Gunn beat British Bulldog and Owen Hart and Justin Hawk Bradshaw when Henry Godwin pinned Bradshaw after the slop drop. Bradshaw subbed for the injured Billy Gunn. Not much of a match, so the fans entertained themselves by chanting "We want Sonny." 7. Hunter Hearst Helmsley beat Mark Marrow. Marrow began on offense. Hunter took a powder 3 times, causing ring announcer Howard Finkel to announce that if Hunter were counted out, he would not only lose the match, but also the title. Hunter then returned just barely in time to beat the 10 count. They brawled to the outside. Hunter then took over offense, but Marrow made a comeback with a head scissors. Marrow then hit the top rope Hurricane Rana for a 2 count, but Hunter recovered and hit a backbreaker. Marrow then hit the Marisol for another 2 count. However, in the end, out of nowhere Hunter pulled out a pair of brass knuckles and hit Marrow for the pin. A good match, but the finish came out of nowhere. 8. Undertaker beat Vader by DQ. Undertaker grabbed a chair and tried to hit Vader, but hit the ropes instead. It looked like Vader was actually trying to miss the chair shot because it looked like he didn't want to take it. Vader was briefly thrown into the crowd throw number 2, and he made a brief comeback until he missed a second rope splash. Undertaker went for the chokeslam, but in the end Mankind ran in for the DQ, but Undertaker fought back and cleared the ring. 9. Sid beat Mankind after a chokeslam and powerbomb. Before the match, Mankind grabbed the mic and said, "It's not too late to give Uncle Paul a Christmas present," and that would be the WWF title. Mankind then grabbed the belt out of Finkel's arms. Sid then hit Mankind with a boot on the floor. Sid then hit a hard chair shot across Mankind's back, then threw Mankind into the crowd throw number 3. Mankind ran to the back, however, and got a trash can, ran back out, tried to hit Sid with it, but Sid blocked it and nailed Mankind. Sid missed a charge into the turnbuckle and Mankind took over. A loud Psycho Sid chant began. Sid backdropped out of a piledriver attempt and attempted a chokeslam until Mankind stopped it by applying a mandible claw. He recovered though, but Mankind regained control with a low headbutt. He then grabbed the urn and hit Sid with it for a 2 count. Sid sent Mankind to the floor, but then Undertaker attacked him. Vader then came down to combat that and attacked Undertaker. However, while all of this was going on the outside, back in the ring Sid chokeslammed and powerbombed Mankind for the 3 count. Vader and Undertaker then ran into the ring. As Vader was choking Undertaker, Sid grabbed a chair to try to save Undertaker, but on the swing Vader moved and Sid hit Undertaker instead by mistake. When Undertaker recovered, he got up and hit Sid with a chokeslam. As Undertaker stood in the ring for a few minutes, as he was about to leave, Sid recovered and he hit him with a chokeslam. When Undertaker recovered, he saw Sid walking to the back, so he ran after him. They brawled up the aisle to end the show. A good setup for the match at MSG they are promoting next month. Notes: no return date was announced. The crowd was the biggest of the year, by a long shot, at the Nassau Coliseum. Finkel announced Shotgun Saturday Night could be seen in Long Island on Channel 55, recently picked up on cable carriers as Channel 28 on Long Island. The show lasted 3 hours 40 minutes, longer than typical. WCW pay-per-view coverage. WCW Starrcade, Piper vs. Hogan, Guerrero vs. Page, Lex vs. Giant, Jarrett vs. Benoit. WCW Starrcade 96. December 29, 1996. Nashville, Tennessee, at the Coliseum. By Wade Keller, Torch editor. 1. Ultimo Dragon beat Dean Malenko, with Sonny Ono. Dusty Rhodes pushed Malenko as more than a cruiserweight, saying he can beat any man of any size. The first 10 minutes was all mat work, and great mat work. US fans are so used to mat work being used when guys are catching their breath, they tend to not even give great mat work a chance, but this was a clinic and the fans were totally into the match. At 13:36 Dragon hit a wheel kick and a powerbomb for the first near fall of the match. At 14 minutes, Malenko reversed a tombstone and scored a 2 count which got a pop. Just great fan heat at his point. At 14:30 Malenko went for his Texas Cloverleaf, but Ultimo fought to the ropes. He then went for a double underhook powerbomb and bridge for a 2 count. Malenko dove at Ultimo, but Ultimo kept his balance and Malenko flew over the top rope. Ultimo hit a spin hook kick off the apron and hit a moonsault body block. At 16:30 Ultimo elbowed Malenko off of the corner and then quickly went for a moonsault, but just as quickly Malenko moved. Malenko then quickly applied the Texas Cloverleaf. Sonny Ono jumped on the ring apron and Malenko released the hold to yell at him. That spot always makes the wrestler look so stupid. Anyway, Ultimo rolled up Malenko from behind for a great near fall. At 17:25 Malenko gave Ultimo a brainbuster suplex. After the move Malenko showed some fire, which in and of itself was an amazing sight because he never does. But Ultimo quickly slipped Malenko into his tiger suplex into a bridge for a 3 count. Ono and Ultimo celebrated their win together. Probably the last match of 1996 to add itself to the Match of the Year candidate list. Really good. 4.5 stars. 2. Akira Hokuto, with husband Kensuke Sasaki and Sonny Ono, beat Medusa at 7:04. They started out with hair pulling. The action then picked up with Medusa hitting a spin DDT off the ropes. Nick Patrick was slow to come out and make the count. Hokuto hit a superplex for a 2 count. In the end, Ono hit Medusa with a flagpole, which looked totally harmless. Hokuto followed up with a top rope dropkick and a Northern Lights bomb, a sideways brainbuster suplex, for the win. After the match Sasaki and Ono argued over who got to celebrate first with Hokuto. 1.75 stars. Gene Okerlund interviewed Roddy Piper, who was in hyper charisma mode, but not making much sense. He said he was just getting warmed up. He ran down some other names in history who might be considered true icons of the sport, such as Strangler Lewis, Gorgeous George, and Dusty Rhodes. When Okerlund asked Piper about his hip, he hopped on one leg. 3. Jewson Liger pinned Rey Mysterio Jr. at 14:20. They opened with a nice series of high spots, including a great series of offense by Rey Jr. at 4 minutes that took Liger to the floor. Liger then kicked the rail in frustration. Liger played up his heel roll and roughed up Rey Jr. on the floor, including a powerbomb at ringside. At 6:10 Rey Jr. made a comeback only to miss a top rope dropkick. Liger followed with a salto backbreaker and a surfboard. A minute later Rey Jr. made a comeback with a released German suplex and a springboard dropkick on Liger. He then applied a full camel clutch. Rey Jr. then went for a springboard body block, but Liger caught him in mid-flight with a dropkick and scored a 2 count. Liger then hit a released German suplex and then applied a Boston Crab. Liger hit a rolling capo kick in the corner, but Rey Jr. bounced back with a monkey flip and a wheel kick followed by a top rope head scissors. When Rey went for a moonsault body block, Liger caught him in midair. They spilled to the floor and were almost counted out. Rey Jr. rolled in at the 8 count, but Liger hadn't even begun to re-enter the ring, so the match should have ended. The ref awkwardly had to stop his count for no reason. The announcers, quick on their feet, said Rey Jr. told the ref to stop his count. Rey Jr. hit a guillotine leg drop and went for the pin, but Liger put his foot over the bottom rope. Ray Jr. missed a senton and Liger hit a top rope headbutt to score a 2 count. Ray Jr. missed a springboard Frankensteiner. Liger made a quick recovery and hit a spinning axe kick followed by his Liger bomb for the pin. Actually a weak finish because it seemed they messed up their timing, but went to the sudden finish anyway rather than spend a minute building up to it again. Perhaps they were given a go-home signal and had no choice but to end it so quickly. Very good match, but below expectations. 4 stars. 4. Jeff Jarrett beat Chris Benoit with woman at 13:51. Benoit shoved Jarrett to the mat and slapped him. Jarrett got upset. Benoit showed how he has strengthened what used to be the weakest part of his game, showing emotion in the ring and building a persona. He tried hard to be the heel, although the crowd thought that made him even more cool. At 2:24 Jarrett made the traditional babyface comeback and actually walked over Benoit's back, which got a pop. Jarrett charged at him at 3:30 and nailed him with a series of punches. Benoit bailed out of the ring, so Jarrett followed. When woman grabbed Jarrett, Jarrett turned to her, so Benoit hit Jarrett from behind. Benoit began to work over Jarrett and then played to the crowd, receiving a mix of cheers and boos. Jarrett blocked a Benoit superplex and choked Benoit on the middle rope. When Jarrett charged Benoit, woman moved him so Jarrett straddled the ropes. Benoit hit a short clothesline and then whipped Jarrett into the rail at ringside. Jarrett flipped into the front row. Jarrett then dropped Benoit throat first over the rail. Back in the ring, Benoit surprised Jarrett with a back suplex for a 2 count at 7:25. Benoit went to a chinlock and then a sleeper. At 11:07 Jericho came back and hit a nice overhead released suplex. Jarrett then went for the figure 4, but woman raked his eyes. Arnold Anderson then walked to ringside. He walked right past Benoit and stood in Jarrett's corner. Conant and Hugh Morris came out and went after woman. Woman kicked Hugh low, but was soon overpowered. Meanwhile, Anderson DDT'd an unsuspecting Jarrett on the ringside floor and then threw him in the ring. Kevin Sullivan came to the ring and shattered a wooden chair over Benoit's head, which the camera pretty much missed. Jarrett's arm flopped over Benoit and the ref counted to 3. Good match, and the ending did a good job adding dissension and ambiguity to the Horseman situation and further the Dungeon versus Horseman feud. 3.25 stars. Okerlund tried to interview Anderson, Jarrett, Benoit, and woman, but all just walked past him without commenting. Steve and Deborah McMichael came out. Steve told Benoit that woman is screwing up his head. Deborah, who has really come into her own and is now fantastic behind the mic, made a lewd comment that caused Okerlund to almost drop the mic. She then ripped on the fans and told them they can't have her and they'll have to settle for their plump wives at home. Great stuff. 5. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash beat Meng and the Barbarian at 13:15. They did some nice spots early, putting over Meng and Barbarian as tough and intense. Nash tagged in a few minutes into the match with a serious look on his face, and then went to his usual knees and elbows in the corner. Nick Patrick interfered on behalf of the Outsiders throughout the match. When Barbarian hit a stiff clothesline on Hall at 5:30, Patrick was slow to make the 2 count. A few minutes later, Six chased Jimmy Hart to the back. Barbarian applied a nerve hold on Hall, but Patrick didn't lift Hall's arm to see if he was knocked out. Hall, though, basically made a Hogan-esque Superman comeback which seemed pretty out of place. Hall tagged Nash at 11:04. Barbarian loaded his boot, but missed Nash, who quickly went to the jackknife for the quick 3 count by Patrick. 2.25 stars. Ted DiBiase interviewed Hulk Hogan, Elizabeth, and Vince. WCW has come to accept that Liz is being held prisoner against her will by Hogan. They never bring it up and never ask Liz how she feels. They're actually just waiting for Randy Savage to come back, but in the meantime the whole scenario is pretty ridiculous. 6. Eddie Guerrero pinned Diamond Dallas Page at 15:16 to win the U.S. title tournament. They did some nice spots in the opening 5 minutes, but for some reason never captured the interest of the crowd. The pace then slowed and lacked fire and heat for a while. The wrestlers could sense that and picked up the pace, but the crowd wasn't responding. At 11:35 Guerrero missed a frog splash. A few minutes later Hall, Nash, and Six came to the ring, and rather than interfere on behalf of Page as they had in recent matches, they worked against him. Hall gave Page the outsider edge. Guerrero then hit a frog splash for the win. Afterward, Six attacked Guerrero to set up their match at the NWO pay-per-view. 3 stars. 7. Lex Luger beat the Giant at 13:12. In the opening minutes Luger punched the Giant, but the Giant wasn't affected. Giant followed with a slow, prowling approach to wear down Luger. At 8:30 Luger come back and set Giant on the top rope to set up the torture rack, but Giant blocked it and went for a dropkick. Luger moved so Giant hit the mat hard. Luger went for a quick cover, but Giant kicked out of it, sending Luger in the air and on top of ref Mark Curtis. Nick Patrick came out to replace Curtis. Luger lifted the Giant into the rack, but Patrick clipped Luger's leg from behind. Six ran in and backside kicked Luger in the face. Sting arrived and backed Patrick into the corner. He then approached Luger, said something to him, and left the baseball bat at his side. Luger then hit Giant with a low blow with the bat and covered him. Ref Curtis recovered enough to make the 3 count. Giant got upset with his loss. 2 1/4 stars. 8. Roddy Piper beat Hulk Hogan, with Ted DiBiase, with a sleeper at 15:35. Piper made a calm, all-business ring entrance as fans chanted Roddy, Roddy. Hogan played up the heel roll at the start, telling DiBiase to tell Piper to back up to the center of the ring before he'd get in the ring. Bobby Heenan hyperboled, Piper looks like he's in the best shape of his life. Piper did look to be in fine condition. Hogan slapped Piper at the start. Piper just stared back. Piper came back with a series of punches, backing Hogan away. Heenan said, "I can't believe I'm saying this, but go get him, Piper." At 3:10 Hogan punched Piper and rammed him into the turnbuckle. He missed a corner charge and Piper took over a fence with an eye poke. Piper clotheslined Hogan coming off the ropes. Hogan took his first bump of the match. Piper went to a headlock at 6 minutes. Hogan knocked Piper from the ring and then hit Piper's back with an axe handle. Back in the ring, Hogan ducked a Piper clothesline, but Piper returned with a dropkick. Hogan fled, but Piper chased after him down the aisle, ramming him into the rail before they returned to the ring. Piper whipped Hogan with a belt. Piper then went after DiBiase, giving Hogan a chance to hit Piper from behind. He rammed Piper into the stairs and threw him into the rail. Piper bumped into the first row of fans. Back in the ring, Hogan applied an abdominal stretch. Schiavone made reference to Piper's hip replacement surgery. Piper escaped and rolled up Hogan for a 2 count. The crowd didn't buy it at all and didn't pop. At 13:10 Piper suplexed Hogan. A minute later Hogan went for a sudden leg drop but Piper moved. Hogan sold the miss and Piper kicked at Hogan's legs. The NWO then ran to the ring leading to the finish. Giant went for the chokeslam and held Hogan in the air. That prompted an angry Mark to leap into the ring to try to be a hero for Piper. He got beat up for his trouble before being subdued by security. Piper escaped Giant's grip by biting him on the face. When Hogan stepped in, Piper quickly applied the sleeper. A minute later Hogan was out cold for the clean finish. Hogan lay there for a while before a concerned-looking Hall and Nash slapped him and woke him up. Giant prowled around ringside grinning at the result of the match. Giant then walked away without his about-to-be former NWO partners. WCW pay-per-view coverage. WCW Starrcade Roundtable Reviews. WCW Starrcade 96. December 29, 1996. Nashville, Tennessee, at the Coliseum. Bruce Mitchell, Torch columnist. This was a damn great show. The first hour and 15 minutes could stand with any promotion in the world on its work ethic. Dean Malenko had his best WCW match in defeat to Ultimo Dragon. Kudos to WCW for adding their belt to the other 8. I assume they're not retiring their successful cruiserweight division. Kira Hokuto carried Medusa to a better-than-expected match. The real battle of the icons, Jushin Liger vs. Rey Mysterio Jr. was a superbly worked match. Chris Benoit has been fun to watch all year and is pushing Steve Austin for the breakout character of 1996. The Horseman vs. Dungeon angle is in danger of coming apart at the seams any second, but it's still fun. I-2, 8 Deborah McMichael. The Outsiders vs. Faces match was the worst of the show, and for the first time since their arrival, the two seemed to lose heat. The match with the Steiners at the NWO pay-per-view should help, as should less airtime for Uncle Eric. Diamond Dallas Page vs. Eddie Guerrero was another good match. Piper's interview may have been the single worst of all time. Giant vs. Luger was no great match, but both guys worked hard and Lex's Giant rack build-up obviously worked. One of the best parts of the show was the story of the Giant. The Sting angle, as odd as it seemed in the beginning, is turning into one great story. The mystery of Sting's intention will clearly be solved and the patience they are showing makes it even more effective. The Piper vs. Hogan match had some great drama, but went on too long. That idiot fan screwing up the finish didn't help, but at least Piper got the win and stayed strong in the aftermatch. Fun to see Hogan get the Hogan sucks reaction, which isn't exactly what a cool heel with a huge ego wants to hear. Fun show. John Williams Torch pay-per-view comments rule number 7. Each WCW pay-per-view must contain no fewer than 3 negative comments. Piper throws terrible-looking punches. Luger throws terrible-looking punches. Hogan and Piper look really old. Now that the quota has been filled, this was a hell of a pay-per-view. WCW has an interesting mix of talent. They have the ability to turn over half the card to the likes of Ultimo Dragon, Dean Malenko, Jewson, Liger, Rey Mysterio Jr., Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and Dallas Page. And they have the ability to trot out the stars such as Hogan, Piper, Hall, Nash, Luger, and the Giant. What made this show work was that on some level, everything worked. The stars gave the crowd what they wanted, as evidenced by the pops for Piper's and Luger's wins. Whether the matches would rate as good really didn't matter. They did deliver what the crowd wanted. On the other hand, Hall and Nash actually worked a good match, selling for their opponents and making them look good. And in the end, the match delivered as well, since no one really wanted to see Hall and Nash lose. The real work was done by the workers, though for a change on WCW pay-per-views, the workers held the crowd's attention throughout. The two juniors matches had good heat, while Benoit has reached the stage that he can draw heat anytime he cranks up the intensity with some stiff work. Perhaps most impressive was the heat Guerrero and Page got when put in the unenviable role of following the outsiders, with the upcoming Hogan vs. Piper match creeping into the fans' minds. Take a step back and consider the talent WCW did not use on this card: Guerrero, Psychosis, and Jericho. This is a promotion loaded with talent. Something to watch to see if this was simply an up Nashville crowd or if WCW's workers are starting to get over as a much-needed complement to the top-heavy NWO versus WCW direction of the company. Needed because the NWO angle is an edge that's starting to wear out WCW, and the company needs to expand beyond it. Chris Avisa, Torch columnist. It is the match of the year. No, that's not enough. It's the match of the decade. No, that's not enough. It's the match of a lifetime. Almost there, but not quite. There it is, fans, the match of the century. Oh, by the way, this so-called greatest match since two T-Rexes battled 150 million years ago for the Jurassic Park HVT. Title is, whisper in a very low tone, non-title. That's right, Hogan vs. Piper, the biggest match on the biggest card in the history of the universe, is non-title. Even poor Dusty got confused by that bonehead move. That big disconnect to brain switch in the basement of CNN Center most definitely was activated for that stroke of genius. Imagine what would happen if the NBA said this year's NBA Finals were not really for the title, or the World Series would be played but the winner would not be the champion of baseball, or on Super Bowl Sunday the Vince Lombardi Trophy would not be awarded. But hey suckers, tune in all the same and keep buying those sponsored products. For the rest of this review, please run Zavisa Standard number 7. That is the one where I say how WCW is really two split promotions, one good and one bad, and the first hour was damn good but the rest pretty much ranged from mediocre to really bad with the usual cheap run-ins and non-clean finishes. I have written it at least a half dozen times, so just connect the usual dots. The only new developments in this pay-per-view were as follows. Deborah and Steve McMichael showed they are the biggest no-talent couple in the history of show business. I love that sign, seen only once at the very start, that said, Hogan and the NWO are just rejects from the WWF. Of course, a good portion of the WWF is now made of Vader, Austin, Mankind, and Pillman, so I imagine a sign proclaiming the reverse would also not be far from insightful. Also, I hope somebody does a bit of investigative reporting and discovers why Liger and Ray Jr. pretty much grounded themselves. WCW pay-per-view coverage. WCW Starrcade reader reacts and poll results. WCW Starrcade 96. December 29, 1996. Nashville, Tennessee, at the Coliseum. Jeffrey Cohen, 8.5, so much for the Invincible Giant. Everybody remains part of the gang except for Hogan, who still can't take a pinfall, but is willing to take a nap in the ring to get over a 46-year-old man's powerful sleeper hold. A rousing first hour that gradually declined inside the ring. Crowd heat dissipated, but came back for the main event. With the time they had allotted, it seemed Piper and Hogan might actually wrestle a 20-minute match. Shawn Finicum, Hulk Hogan finally does a job, but what a lackluster finish it was. It being non-title really takes a lot of the shine away from the ending. The crowd seemed more interested in the fan being dragged away from ringside. The finish to the Lex Luger match was excellent. I was stunned to finally see the NWO lose. They are running the angles with Sting and Nick Patrick into the ground. Dave Rosenberg, 6.0. They actually gave the fans some finishes they wanted to see. The NWO finally did some jobs even though Hogan's wasn't a title match. I like the Luger vs. Giant match the best because they finally ended the Luger match with a convincing win for him and not some dumb DQ. I was at the first Hogan vs. Piper match at Madison Square Garden back in 1985, and this match just didn't have the magnitude of that one. Trevor Dunson, 8.0 I was happy to see Hogan do a job. Also happy to see Giant do a job. I think they are making the NWO more realistic. Overall, a really good card. Chuck Morris, 6.0 I love the finish to Benoit vs. Jarrett, especially the Sullivan chair shot. I very much enjoyed Piper vs. Hogan. It almost looked like Superstar Graham vs. Jack Briscoe, though, didn't it? Arto Zolines, 8.0 The ending of Piper vs. Hogan was great. Probably the only time we'll ever see Piper get a win over Hogan. I think it's the first time I have ever seen a sleeper hold victory in a pay-per-view event. Brian Mazza, 6.0 Two shockers. I was really surprised to see Hogan do a clean job getting choked out and Liger getting a big win on a pay-per-view. I think the demise of the NWO is coming soon. If Hall and Nash don't distance themselves from Hogan very soon, they're going to go down with it, as will WCW's ratings. Too many run-ins and too much interference for it to be considered a good show. Brian Freeman, 7.5 I had skipped the last two pay-per-views intentionally. I liked this card. Everybody seemed to work hard. Seeing Hogan do a clean job to Piper just stunned me even though it was a non-title matchup. They may finally be able to transition the tide against the NWO. The one thing I don't understand is everyone who was wearing NWO merchandise cheered when Liger won the match. Piper still can't wrestle. He never could. That's probably as good of a match as those two will ever have. They need to get Flair back. Torch poll results. Average reader score 7.2. Best match Malenko vs. Dragon, 46%, Liger vs. Ray, 28%, Jarrett vs. Benoit, 18%, Luger vs. Giant, 6%, Hall and Nash vs. Faces of Fear, 2%. Worst match, Hall and Nash vs. Faces, 52%, Medusa vs. Hokuto, 30%, Luger vs. Giant, 10%, Hogan vs. Piper, 8%. And notes with Wade Keller. Negatives into positives. WCW seems like a promotion that right now can do no wrong. There are so many instances where they have looked foolish, only to turn a negative into a positive. The Giant turn is the latest. When the Giant joined the NWO, it was because they needed to fulfill their promise of delivering a big surprise. When Davey Boy Smith wasn't available, it turned out to be the Giant. That made Team WCW inferior to the NWO. WCW, though, over the course of 3 months has survived that lopsidedness by building around Randy Savage for 1 month, then building around World War III another month, and around Roddy Piper this month. Because of their weaknesses in obvious big-name players on Team WCW, and without Sting to really use, it has given them a chance to build up Barbarian and Meng who, while they aren't main eventers, are seeming credible against the outsiders. Because the Giant was with the NWO, and because Hogan played such a cowardice role during Giant's turn, the Giant will be more over than had he never joined the NWO in the first place. Now with the likely return of Randy Savage, the eventual coming out of Sting, and the Giant back on the side of WCW, that gives them the breathing room they needed. And that breathing room may allow the NWO to pull one more big surprise out of their bag, Curt Hennig. Hennig wants to be a heel, but for a while it seemed as if WCW would need Hennig to be part of Team WCW just to keep the odds reasonably even. Now there is room for him in the NWO. But given the way Roddy Piper has been handled, he is the real outsider. We can't make any assumptions about how Hennig will be used when he debuts next month. Hulk Hogan really seems rejuvenated, too. He has really taken to the role of being a heel. Acting as if he beat Piper and gloating about it is a perfect way to react to losing clean in the middle of the ring. It's what a heel should do, because it makes fans mad that Hogan isn't showing his anger at having lost. His interview delivery had usually been top-notch, but the content of his interviews grew stale back in the mid-80s, and they hadn't changed since. Since his heel turn, he has used that old charm that made him an unbearable egomaniac as a babyface to gain legit heel heat. And because of it, his interviews are among the best in wrestling these days. Imagine saying that a year ago. Important subscriber info: barring a major news story this weekend prompting a change, we will be taking next week off to recover from a busy few weeks and to recharge our batteries after the holidays. The Torch 900 line will still be updated daily. There are no major events this weekend in the United States, which is rare in this era of wrestling. Although in nearly 10 years of publishing, I think we've only previously skipped 1 week. If history is any indication, we will more than make up for the skipped week with a double-issue week when merited. The next issue's tentative scheduled mailing date is January 14th, so the earliest you should call regarding an issue lost in the mail is Thursday, January 23rd. A quick reminder that if you believe an issue has been lost in the mail, you can call 612-888-8255 854-8336 to request a replacement, but if you call before the Thursday of the week following the scheduled mailing, 9 days later, the request will be ignored. Do not direct calls to the editorial phone line. Also, address changes and subscription renewals, including credit card orders, cannot be made via voicemail on either phone line. They must be sent via regular mail, email, or fax. Year-end balloting. Don't forget to send in your year-end ballots for the year-end awards. Make note that the categories stayed the same as last year, so you might want to refer to the results of last year's poll to help you in voting. But notice that one category was added at the end. Category 45 is a bit different, requesting your top 5 draft picks for you to start a promotion tomorrow. If you had access to any 5 wrestlers in the world, which 5 would you use to build the foundation for your new expansion promotion, considering that you want the promotion not just for vanity purposes, but also to be profitable? You are encouraged to comment on why you chose the 5 wrestlers you did. Select comments will be published. The deadline for ballots is January 31st. CyberTorch update. We got sidetracked during the holidays from finalizing our Torch website. Rest assured, we have not forgotten about it, and I expect this month to have it launched. Plans are for it to be an interactive supplement to the weekly Torch newsletter and be updated more than once per week with new features and items. I will go into more detail when the format is finalized and a launch date is set. End of newsletter. This is the end of this conversion. Be sure to comment and subscribe. See you next time.